In this lecture, we will learn about particle effects in the Panda 3D game engine. A particle effect is a sequence of small images that are created, moved, and are destroyed. They are used to create effects like explosions, smoke, and bubbles. The three key parts of any particle effect are the renderer, emitter, and factory. The renderer renders the particle objects. Then the emitter assigns the initial locations and velocity for the particles. The factory is responsible for generating particles and assigning their attributes. We can create a particle system fully in code, however there is a much easier way. Panda 3D gives us a tkinter GUI interface that we can use to create a particle effect, edit it, and save it to a .ptf file that can be loaded in our game. Let's go to the Panda 3D folder on our computer. Inside of there we will go into the samples folder, followed by the particles folder. You should see a file named particle panel. Let's double click this file to open it. A few windows pop up. We see the main TK window, a particle panel window, and a Panda window. If we close the TK window, the whole thing closes, so don't do that. The particle panel lets us tinker with the values until we get a result we like, and the Panda window shows us what the particle effect will look like in the game. I'm not going to read off each field here, that would get boring pretty quickly, but the names are fairly self-explanatory. Also, if you want to see in-depth documentation on this window, I highly suggest going to the link attached to this lecture as a course resource. It is a link to the particle effects section of the Panda 3D documentation. It is a dense read, but well worth it. You can play around with the settings until you make something you like in this window. When you're ready to save your effect, open up the File menu on the particle panel and go to Save Params. Let's download it and drag it into our My Stuff folder, where all of our other resources for our Panda 3D game have gone so far. I made an explosion effect I think turned out pretty cool, and attached it to this lecture as a course resource. We can preview this effect by loading it into the particle panel. To do this, we will go to File, Load Params, and then choose the explosion.ptf file. When you do, you will notice the explosion effect that I created is displayed. Let's jump to PyCharm and learn how to add this to our game through code. Up at the top of the program, we will type from direct.showbase.showbase import showbase, and from direct.particles.particle-effect import particle effect. Then we will create a class named myApp that extends the showbase class. Inside of this class, we will implement the init function. Inside of this function, we will call showbase.init and pass in self. Then we will call base.disableMouse. This disables the mouse, but is essential, so that we can manually position the camera. Without this line, code that attempts to change the position of the camera will have no effect. After that, we will call base.enableParticles. This allows particle effects to be loaded for our game. Again, without this line, the rest of the code won't work, because you have not told Panda 3D to allow particles to be rendered in your game. Then we will set the background color to black by typing base.setBackgroundColor, and passing in 0, 0, 0. Next, we will set the position of the camera by typing camera.setPos, and passing in 0 as the first argument, -15 as the second argument, and 0 as the third argument. Time to actually load in the particle effect. First, we will create a variable named p and set it equal to a particle effect object. Next, we will type p.loadConfig and pass in the string explosion.ptf. This will load in our particle effect file. After that, we need to start the particle animation by typing p.start and passing in parent equals render as the first argument, and render parent equals render as the second argument. At the bottom of the code, we will create a variable named app and set it equal to a myApp object. Then we will call app.run. Let's run the code. When we do, you will notice that the explosion particle effect was properly loaded and displays in our game. In the next lecture, we will learn about collision detection in the Panda 3D game engine.